we're back for another episode of Soul Shift Sundays. We're here with Marc Weinstein. We're really excited to have you with us. He's going to share a little bit about his story and his journey up to date, some really cool stuff. So let's jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so how far back do you want me to go?
Let's start with your background.
Okay, cool. So I like to say that I'm a recovering investment banker. I studied finance and economics undergraduate. Actually, this weekend would have been my 10-year anniversary from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And I came up during the financial crisis. Through that time period, got quite a bit disillusioned with the traditional path of a Wharton graduate, which is like investment banking, private equity. And I turned down a job in private equity after 2 years working in the finance world to kind of carve out my own path. Various entrepreneurial endeavors later, the only thing that remained consistent other than my passion to kind of build and create was my yoga practice. And it was just like, as an entrepreneur, you have these ups and downs, right? These massive waves of like, you go into a meeting and yeah, like that was the best meeting ever. And then the person never calls you back. And you're like, what? That person never called me back. So the only time I found peace was on my yoga mat. And after my first company failed, I decided that I wanted to take a teacher training. And I became a 200-hour certified yoga instructor. I still lead classes today. I lead breathwork sessions and online virtual meditations and asana classes. And I love jnana yoga. I love speaking about the philosophy of yoga and asking hard questions. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Look Up podcast. I'm now the host of the Look Up podcast. We're 30 episodes in. I've recorded 40 episodes and I'm releasing one per week. And Look Up started as an exploration of what it means to be a human today in the context of our relationship to technology and social media. And it's kind of expanded towards what does it mean to be a human today, period. And I like to do that through explorations and dialogues with entrepreneurs and with investors, with spiritual leaders, with psychologists and researchers. So I've been doing that for the last year. Otherwise, little known fact about me, I'm a startup consultant. I advise startup companies, mostly mission driven. One I'm working with today, I'm going to shout them out, is called Steward. We're a financing and services platform for regenerative agriculture. So if you're interested in regenerative agriculture,
super cool.
Yeah, it's super cool.
This is definitely the time for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think COVID, the pandemic showed us just how vulnerable our food supply was in the US. But we can get into that. I know this was meant to be an intro. I'm a long story long kind of guy, so if ever you want to just
don't worry, no, so are we. We get lost for hours in every direction, so feel free.
Okay, awesome.
So going off of that, where have you been during COVID, and how have you been handling everything that's been going on in the world?
Yeah, so as we discussed before, I landed in France 4 days before the world went into quarantine mode. I'm typically based in Los Angeles, and I decided to stay here for personal reasons and have been here ever since, just quarantining at home, kind of following the news cycle. And really just the way I've been dealing with it has been leaning into, I guess, what is, and what is has been just, I'm at home, and what can I do to improve myself? What can I do to counteract the desire to improve myself simultaneous to improving myself?
To just kind of be.
To just be. I've been learning French. I've been really leaning into the podcast and recording 2 or 3 episodes a week and joining other folks on their podcasts. So thank you so much for inviting me on and for having me. This is just like a great way to share with my community and yours some new ideas. And so that's really, I think, how I've been spending my time. I also have been writing a ton. Having studied economics, as I mentioned, like I just see how the machine is working. And I have a lot of frustration around how the machine is working right now, working for some and not working for the majority of others.
Totally.
And so I've been writing quite a bit about that. And we can talk about that as well if you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a really quick question to piggyback off of this. You're in a different country. You're usually in LA, and being even though you're at home, I'm assuming, surrounded by another culture. And
Yeah.
has that affected or impacted you in how you saw your life in LA and going back, and what it means to maybe flow between two places? Like, I know that's been a thing for me, for sure. During this whole time, I was like, I'm going back to New York. And then I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Maybe having a balance of these two things is not actually a bad thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Where are you in all of this, if anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. One, on being surrounded by a different culture, I find it to be extremely enriching. There's so many little nuances to learn about different cultures. And I love language because I think within language we get to understand a certain culture's way of thinking. For example,
Absolutely.
the French the French do not have a word for fun. At least to my knowledge, it's like the word is like drôle, like trop drôle, like it's like silly, or
Or
like
weird. Oh, that's so
weird.
weird.
Yeah,
Drôle.
très bizarre, and but there's not like a fun, and we as Americans, we say fun all of the time. So I find that to be like really interesting. Another interesting element of that cultural difference is the French have a word in between acquaintance and friend. And so for me, like when I tell my partner, like, oh, like that, my friends, like my new friend, she's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you just met these people. So it's like you have acquaintance, the word is escaping me, I don't know. You have friend, which is ami, but in between you
Connaissance.
have copain or
Copain et connaître quelqu'un et un copain. Like a connaissance
oh,
is
connaissance is like
connaissance is an acquaintance.
there
Yeah.
you go. That's what I forgot. And then copain is
Yeah.
like, it's like a
A
friend,
friend.
but it's not like, there you go. So you know better than I do, Tatiana, because like I'm just learning,
But
I'm just
no,
learning
but
the language.
seriously, it totally affects also like behavior.
Yeah.
It's like, because this how we
Yeah.
compartmentalize language, but it also affects the way that we process life and how we compartmentalize the people that we interact with and the experiences that we have. So language totally affects behavior. So welcome to our country.
Yes. And I absolutely love it here. And I'm in the south of France, so it's the nature, it reminds me so much of California because you have the mountains right on the sea. These mountains are a bit more kind of like, you have like gray stone, which is so beautiful. And I think also like the culture kind of encapsulates the surrounding nature. And so there's just this beauty, this joie de vivre here, and the food is so good. And I find it to be really peaceful, really peaceful here. As far as like, I've spent the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years of my life consistently on the road. So my second company was a music festival business. I traveled a ton for that business. Also doing a lot of research, let's call it. I was going to many music festivals as an attendee and absolutely loved that for a number of years. I've been a venture investor for 2 of the last 4 years, and that required me traveling around the world to different cities, meeting with different companies, raising capital from different funds. So that has been really like the nature of my last 3 or 4 years of life have been very fluid, like barely calling one place home. As much as I called LA home, the longest I would be there would be like 6 weeks at a time. And one thing that I think this situation, the quarantine and COVID, has really shown me is how much I love planting roots.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Los Angeles, what drove me from New York City to Los Angeles is that LA provides the cosmopolitan experience and the kind of melting pot of cultures, but that a big city can, but it also has a lot of nature and beauty. And so for me, I can't see myself going back to a big city. In fact, I would absolutely love to just have a small piece of land somewhere, whether it be here in Europe or in California or in the desert or somewhere where I can cultivate my own food and, really take time to focus on the things that I love. That's the dream for me right now, is to really plant my roots somewhere.
Yeah.
Totally. I get that.
I feel like we're all feeling that lately, this like upheaval of just wanting to create your own community. It's really interesting that you mentioned you worked on festivals too, because we know that you were involved in Fire Festival. How was that experience and how did that affect your life?
Yeah, that that's a fairly well documented experience at this point. It's ironic. It's like I think Jason Silva has been saying this a lot. I love his content. I've been following him a ton, and it's like sometimes a year or a decade can happen in a week. I forget who the quote is, but that's kind of how Fire is for me. Like I was hired as a consultant to Fire Festival. I started on the island like the first weekend in April in 2017. And the festival was the first weekend in May in 2017. So I was there for 4 weeks. And yet it is this experience that has profoundly impacted the way that I view the world, the way that I show up in the world. It's probably the reason why I started this podcast. It led to this documentary on Netflix, which gave me an experience of like being able to have that 15 seconds of fame and see what that is like as well, and be like, oh, okay, like I don't want that, like hot potato.
Right.
Like that's that was super interesting as well. But the experience was extremely challenging, extremely enlightening, and frankly, like I've said this before, but I left feeling a sense of pride that that might be surprising to people who are listening, because within the context of knowing that this thing was a disaster. And when I arrived, knowing that it was going to be extremely challenging to try to pull anything off, having solved a ton of problems in a very short period of time. And then after, the founding team leaves, staying on the island and working with the local community to try to fix some of what went wrong, knowing that I was never going to receive payment for that. I left feeling really empowered, like I could do anything.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of crazy, but it's been a whirlwind. That was 2017. Here we are. It's 3 years later.
And we're in another global disaster.
Yeah, exactly. And now there's that meme. It's like the Fire Festival creators produced 2020.
2020?
No, I didn't.
I haven't seen that one, but it's so funny.
And you're like, we can survive everywhere. We got it.
People are still sending it to me. I'm like, yep, saw it.
Was that kind of the last straw with working with festivals? Was that what ended you working with them ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about podcasts. Festivals are truly a labor of love. They require a ton of capital to pull off, human capital, financial capital. They require a lot of work. Every year you have to take your earnings and reinvest it back into the event. And no matter how big the prior year's event was, it's always uncertain whether you're going to sell tickets. You might book the wrong act, and so many festivals are just artist driven. So
Right.
if you book just that one wrong act, or if the weather is not going to be nice, like be running a business that is completely dependent on the weather, or these instances like COVID, right? Like looking at what's happening to the touring industry right now, it's a shame, because I think festivals provide such an incredible cultural experience where people can go and learn new things and meet new people and find tribe. But, just the slightest event in the weather, and all of a sudden, all of your hard work gets washed away in the rain, potentially. So for me, it was kind of like, this has been a great learning experience. I produced festivals for 2.5 years. I sold my company 90s Fest at the end of 2017. I was like, this is a clean slate. This was like an interesting little journey. And now let's move on to something else.
Yeah. And was that something else, the Look Up podcast? Did that really inspire you to create that?
So the Lookup podcast came later. The Lookup podcast was definitely inspired by the Fire Festival experience. Originally, 2 months after Fire, I love to write and I love to reflect on my own experience and share with folks. So after Fire, 2 months after the event, I wrote a Medium post that was basically like lessons. It was called Lessons from the Fire. And the whole concept behind it was that I was asking the question of like, are we all just like Billy? And of course, at that time, I didn't know just to the extent that Billy had gone, towards faking numbers and defrauding investors and all of the things that he did that put him in jail. But I did know that he presented a really grand vision of what Fire Festival could have been to an audience on social media that didn't reflect the full truth of his experience and what was happening behind the scenes. And I wanted to just call out that, all of us are, most of us, many of us are, were at that time certainly practicing kind of similar behavior online, myself included. Like as I was working on Fire Festival, I posted 3 times from the festival, and it was just like beautiful beaches and, and great, great for me to want to appreciate the views that I was having and take that moment to be grateful for something positive. But the reality of the whole picture was this really stressed out dude trying to solve all of these incredibly challenging problems in a very limited amount of time with very limited sleep, high tensions, a lot of arguments, spending most of my time in front of this computer, actually typing away in an Excel spreadsheet. And those beaches might as well have been my computer background, frankly.
Right.
And so I asked that question, and it was this article that that led the director of the Fire Festival documentary, Chris Smith, to reach out to me. And he said, I read your piece. We're making this documentary. I really want to unpack this side of the story, this social media angle. And so we spoke about it. And then when the documentary came out, I remember like when I recorded that interview, it was just one shot deal. He and I shook hands at the premiere of his previous documentary. I was like, this is the guy that's going to tell the story. And then he invited me to the Vice headquarters in Venice to do the interview. And it was just like camera was set up, document was signed, 4-hour conversation. I'm spilling my heart out in this like cathartic conversation.
Right.
And then I go and I have no idea what's going to come
like
of
how
it.
It's going to come out. Right.
No clue. And I forget. And like, I just kind of forget about it. And I moved on to what was next, which actually was being a venture investor in the blockchain industry, which we can talk about that another time if you want, but that actually ties in with my experience in economics and wanting to create a new world currency, but we'll leave that on the side. And then I'm working in this kind of like very professional role as a steward of investor capital when the documentary comes out, and it's like a month until it's going to be released. And I'm just like, I have no idea. Chris was kind enough to show me the first cut.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it and I was just like, I look terrible. Like this is not a good look for me. I'm in this way too much. First of all, I was there for 4 weeks. Like, can you cut me back? And he's like, yeah, we cut you back. And then I go to the premiere of the documentary and I'm in it for 40 minutes. And I'm just like, no, like WTF. And I had agreed to do an interview with press. So I did the first press interview. And then I was like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I reliving this? Why am I tying myself to this, to this festival? And I kind of got cold feet. But thank God, like, the documentary, I think did a good job of telling the story. And Chris dealt kindly with me. And I think I came out okay as one can come out, having been closely associated with, with the most epic public disaster of recent memory pre-COVID. But yeah, so that when it came out, I was like, okay, now I see that there is some positive out of this documentary. And I don't, I'm not a villain, and I can really try to make something more of this and really keep delivering these positive messages, specifically around social media, mental health, entrepreneurship, worship, kind of the toxic culture of startups.
Yeah.
And that's why I started Look Up. And it was originally an exploration of those subjects and has since expanded out to just really follow my curiosity and cover, speak to interesting people that I want to talk to, as I
Yeah, for
imagine you all are
sure.
doing too. And
Yeah.
just learning and growing, and people
It's
following along.
it's interesting because you start a podcast with that intention, I feel like, to just connect and to enriching yourself and each other through conversation. And there's a whole lot of writing that goes into it too. Like there's just like
Show notes.
hours and hours on end. And if you love it, it's great, because it's like keeping a diary almost. You're just journaling your thoughts and you're putting them down on paper. So it's awesome. It's like a stream of consciousness. I mean, at least for us, that's how it's been.
Yeah.
But it's sitting down and writing a lot of stuff, and it just becomes a whole other thing. It's not just like, hey, what's up? Let's have a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. But then there's a whole like other aspect of how do you want to share? How do you want to present it? And so, it's multi-layered, this podcast world,
Yeah.
for sure. And I don't think any of us get into it with that expectation or thought. It just kind of, you had mentioned it before. It's just like constantly feeling like, oh, wait, there's another thing I could be doing. Oh, wait, I didn't think about that thing that I need to be doing.
Oh, yeah.
Let me learn this. And it's just like a constant evolution of yourself, of your skills, and also of your, just kind of how your mind organizes thoughts and conversations, I feel like, right? Of just being like, oh, okay, like these are I didn't even ask myself these questions before, so this is good.
Yeah.
But, you've been able to now, like 30, 40 episodes in, you've had for sure some amazing conversations.
Yeah.
What do you feel like you've learned the most in all of that?
Wow. Yeah. Well, first, I just want to comment on that point. Like, the average the average person that starts a podcast doesn't get past 7 episodes. So like, congratulations to you two for working on this and like for putting in the commitment and the effort. And I'm going to pat myself on the back too, because there have been times that I'm like,
Let's
why am
all
I
give
doing
ourselves
this?
a pat.
I know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why am I doing this? There's these
Couple.
times when you feel like you're just speaking into the ether and
Right.
there's no feedback. And oftentimes it can be quite vulnerable and sharing really, deeper parts of ourselves. So it's truly, I think I love, like, anyone that's doing a podcast, if you're listening, I would love to talk to you. I think it takes a special kind of person to really dedicate themselves to this work. And it's like most kind of startup companies, like power laws apply as far as monetization goes. Like most podcasts aren't making any money. And then the top 1% of podcasts make a lot of money. And that's not to say that a podcast should be a for-profit endeavor. It's just that there are costs that go into a podcast. Your time has an opportunity cost. I'm spending 15, 20 hours a week interviewing, editing, writing show notes, working with my sound engineer, posting on social media, which is like a half a day in and of itself to every social media platform. And
what a headache.
yeah, it's crazy, but it's
Crazy.
just like you really have to love it. Similar to music festivals in that way. I mean, music festivals it's so rewarding when people show up, but at least in the festival space, you get that feedback because you can see the audience and you're like, oh yeah, like we did this together. And like, look at these people, they're having so much fucking fun. And oh, that's amazing. It's just like, there's no feeling like that. It can be addicting. And one feeling that comes close is if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I listened to that episode with so-and-so and holy shit, I needed that. And it's just like, oh,
yeah.
Exhale.
Even just one of those comments does so much. Have you noticed? It's just like,
one.
Okay, so even if it just got to one person, we did our job. Like that was ultimately what we wanted. And it's easy to get caught up in a numbers game, but ultimately, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
oh my God, are people watching? Are people listening? How many downloads? But then it's like that one person that comes on, they're like, fuck, yes, thank you. And you're
Right.
just like, yeah, okay, I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that one piece of feedback, that one, hey, I love what you're doing. Just like, you really affected me. It's like fuel. It's like the fuel that we need to keep going. And my friend Blue, and I think you guys might know Blue as well. Like, she has a podcast called Deja Blue, and she came on my show, and it's like, she was saying how, media is medicine. And I always said, like, if this has a positive effect on one person, then it will have been worth it. Even if that person is my mom, who I know is listening.
Love
And
that.
actually, I was saying that in jest. And then one day my mom reached out to me during this quarantine situation. And I was like, how are you doing? And, we've been catching up and talking, but not as much as I think she would like. And she said, I've been listening to the show, and I feel like I'm getting my time with you. I feel like we're spending our time together, and I get to see where you're at. I'm like, yeah, that's really cool.
It's a way to stay connected to your friends and your family, right?
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, we have to put our hearts on the line to do this too. Like, there's no point in having these conversations if we're not going to be real and authentic and open and keep our heart open to whatever comes back towards us. So yeah, I feel like it's an awesome way to stay connected, for sure.
And you all have the added pressure of doing video. I mean, I don't even do video. I'm like, if people knew what I looked like through half of the episodes and what I was doing during that time, they certainly wouldn't be coming back.
Yeah, it's a whole production to just start our interviews, because you have to get ready and set up.
You got to make sure the lighting's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God, the lighting has been a disaster for me, because I'm just like, oh wait, like we start and the sun is still out, but then by the time we end our episode, there's like no more light in the room. And I'm like, what is going on? Dorit is like, I'm putting my makeup on, but I take my makeup off to go work out, and then I have to put my makeup on to go back outside or whatever. Like, I'm getting ready twice in a day, and it's like, okay, podcast and video life.
Yeah, exactly. It's a whole nother dimension. So hats off to you for doing it.
But yeah, have you, I mean, for sure, you've had people add value to you and richness throughout the conversations, as well as you just speaking, having episodes of you just speaking into the ether, as you say. And so, in addition to the people that you've come across, and are there any like tools, books, philosophies, things that you've kind of brought all together that come out in these conversations that have helped you, be who you are and how you feel today?
Yeah, definitely. I think every episode I walk away being like, oh, thank God. That's another thing. I'm like, thank God I'm doing this, because at the end of the episode, I feel super enriched, as you said. And it's just like my greatest joy having these conversations. I think, the first 8 episodes, let's call it, were all about our relationship to social media, how it's affecting us all as individuals, our collective mental health, our politics, polarization of just the anger and fear and all that kind of the current paradigm of social media cultivates. And so I've learned a ton on that front, and it's really shaped my ideas and the way that I interact with social media on any given day. I've had guests come on like Tommy Sobel, who created the Go Brick Now movement. Brick is a community of individuals building better relationship with their technology. And so now I do a digital Sabbath every Saturday, Friday night, sundown to Sunday morning. I'm off my phone, I'm off my technology. And frankly, it's some of the best, it is the best day of my week, because the context switching, the mental energy that it takes to switch from your phone to your computer to your phone, the different applications within your phone, every time we switch context, there's energy expelled, energy wasted. And it takes us time to refocus and to recenter. And so that in and of itself has been really helpful to understand. I have digital wellness habits like not sleeping next to my phone, using an analog alarm, not going to bed next to my phone, putting my most important piece of work for the day immediate after my meditation in the morning, making sure that at mealtime I'm not on my phone. I'm with the person that I love or family or myself. So all of that was through Look Up. And I deeply understand, I believe now, how the algorithms, the black boxes of these media platforms dictate the conversation. The YouTube algorithm determines 70+% of what you and I watch on any given day. There's 13 billion hours of content that are watched, I believe, in a given day on YouTube. And so that algorithm is determining what we consume and how we understand and make sense of the world around us. And for it to keep us coming back, it wasn't necessarily a design feature of the algorithm, but the algorithm learned over time that tapping into fear, anger, anxiety, even hatred, these are emotions that keep us coming back. And so if you go on YouTube and you click on a COVID video, right, and you're someone in the spiritual community, then the next 3 videos are going to take you down a path towards Bill Gates is trying to destroy the world by vaccinating all of us.
Yeah.
And, I don't know where you all stand on that front or whatever, but, it is designed, the system is designed to polarize. And so how can we make sense of the world around us, knowing that the tools that we're using every day in order to harvest our information, like, cows being milked for their data, intentionally make it more difficult to make sense of the world because they know that we'll keep coming back. And that is one of the reasons why I've expanded the show from social media towards these other subjects, because I don't believe that we're, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, FANG, Microsoft, are evil. I don't think that there's an intention to do evil, but I do believe that they exist within a system whose structure is designed to maximize shareholder value.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to maximize shareholder value as an online social media platform, you maximize ad dollars in. And to maximize ad dollars in, you have to maximize daily usage and attention that you capture. And so it's actually the background, the broader context in which these companies and these platforms exist that is broken. And so we have to keep peeling back the layer of that onion. And it's also just, there's this feedback loop because they also affect our politics now in a really, really powerful way. And so how can we make systems design changes when our politics are economically captured by these companies? And so now we have to start talking about politics, which is something that I never intended to do on the show.
Right.
And it's just been this really, really beautiful unfolding. And then of course, I can get super meta and macro, and I could be up here and trapped in my head, but then I'm always trying to kind of dose in and titrate with episodes that are more on spirit and, really connecting on an individual level with someone's practices. And no matter who I have on, what their experience, what they've done in this world, it's a human being. And the reason I love long form content like this is because we can connect with one another on a much deeper level than through sound bites.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you're connecting. You're connecting more so than just, images and videos. It's also like more of a long conversation, which is nice to have.
Yeah. And I also like that, you had mentioned you don't know where we stand on I personally was, in my early 20s, a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, and Bill Gates is trying to, and today I find myself not even wanting to go down that rabbit hole because that actually consumes so much of your energy and time, because the reality is you're not going to change that if, you're just thinking about the problem. So if you're not thinking about a solution, then you're just wasting your own energy. You're taking away from, energy that you could be putting towards a solution. And I love that you focus on, trying to find a solution versus, just focusing on these things, taking it more as information and as research to be like, okay, this is what is, what can we do about it? And I feel like a lot of people can get lost in that loop, right?
Yeah.
Because it is addictive and it is a design of just like, it's like energetic vampire. Like that's what these algorithms are in a lot of ways. And if you're not conscious of it, it's so, even when you are conscious of it, sometimes you could just get like sucked into it and you're like, oh shit, I just wasted an hour watching this content, and I'm like, the world is coming to an end.
Yeah,
Like this
and how does it leave you
existential thought.
feeling?
Yeah.
It's horrible. Well, heavy.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
like
sure.
Tati and I both have developed a love-hate relationship with social media, and it's interesting to hear your point of view with it all. And what do you think like are the impacts that it's going to have on our future generations? Do you have like a positive outlook on it, or what's
Yeah.
your outlook on that?
So, and I have to also caveat by saying like, I am not anti-social media. I just think that there are certain design changes that we can make that could potentially improve the way that we interact with these platforms. And I'm certainly not, another person that I discovered through my podcast, Tristan Harris, who created the Center for Humane Technology, is like truly on the forefront in the ears of some of the most influential people in the technology space in Silicon Valley, kind of discussing how can we get better at this, and with policymakers as well. I'm hopeful about the future of the internet, and the future of social media for generations after us, uh, because there are technologies that are being created that are designed to protect our data, to encrypt our information. There is an entirely new internet being born uh, right now, as we're seeing kind of these large institutions decay, in my opinion. And that's one of the reasons why I was in the blockchain space and the cryptocurrency space. It's privacy first. Its value is captured at the endpoints rather at these central focal points that end up becoming just like far too powerful. And I think those kind of tools are going to be able to improve our relationship. And we absolutely need technology to protect us as well. Like, I think that we'll see the same way that we see biohacking come up for our physical body. I think we'll see digital wellness hacking where, entrepreneurs will start to create technology that it's designed to optimize your own experience of life. So you have an AI, an artificial intelligence protector in your pocket who's with you from a young age, who's like learning from you and what your needs are, and whose sole incentive is not financial, but is to protect you from these kind of energetic vampires. I could see that playing out in the future as well. And that's getting way out there. I do tend to get super out there sometimes. And so thanks for reining me back in. I would say
No, really, because it's interesting stuff and it's like these are conversations that we have. We're just like, well, duality, and there is a pro and a con to all of this. And what are the gifts that AI can bring us, but what are also, the maybe parts that we can't control, that we're not thinking of, that can happen. So I mean, really, that's a conversation I'd love to have.
Yeah, for sure.
At some point.
I think also this was something that came up earlier that I wanted to mention, which is, oftentimes we're left, I think right now, if I could describe the feeling that I'm feeling from the collective through use of social media, through use of these platforms, and just in this specific moment in time, May 26, 2020, coronavirus, 2.5 months in, the word is helplessness. I think that many of us are just feeling helpless. Like, there is so much happening at this meta scale. So when I feel helpless, what I do is I want to bring it back down to like the kind of individual level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that I'm doing on Look Up, is like speaking to people about what are your personal practices. how do you stay grounded? How do you take care of yourself in these situations? And yeah, conspiracy theory or not, you know, and whether there's lizards that are trying to take over the world that have come down from another dimension, whether it's just a bunch of rich white dudes at the top that only care about themselves and want to extract value from everyone else. It's like, what do I have control over? I have control over the way that I perceive my environment. I have control over my ideas and the way that I show up every single day for other people. And I think that activism starts at the individual level. We first have to change ourselves, and then we can start that will start a ripple effect. I, like many others that I speak to, get caught up in this kind of like grandiose vision of systems change and we're going to change the world and it's going to be amazing and like everything's falling down right now and we're going to rebuild and blah blah blah. And that's cool, and like it's nice to dream and to have those exciting visions, but at the end of the day, it's like activism and change starts with us.
Right.
Absolutely.
So,
I love that you touched on how you've changed your social media intake and you've become more mindful with that. And you mentioned also it's important to develop like a personal wellness routine. What is your personal wellness routine, especially now with everything going on?
yeah, so I'm like psychotically vigilant about my calendar. I live and die by my calendar. And so I've started this practice, and part of it actually came from a guest that I had on. His name is Nir Eyal. I started this practice of time boxing my days. So I don't specifically schedule every single moment of the day, but I know that when I wake up in the morning, that first hour is going to be dedicated to self practice. So for me, that self practice is, you know, a breathwork session where I'm doing a cleansing pranayama practice, clear out whatever stagnant energy from the night before or the day before, recenter myself, calm and check in with my body, and then start to create and manifest what it is that I want to be doing throughout that day, that week, or just the emotions and feelings that I desire. And then I'll close that out with just like a 20-minute mindfulness meditation practice. And I'm by no means perfect at this. I don't do this every day. I do it as often as I can, but that's the first schedule. And then the next schedule of my day is what I deem the night before to be the most important item of the day. And that can be anything, right? That can be something personal. That can be going to the bank to take care of taxes. That can be, you know, writing that post that I always wanted to write, or whatever. For 2 hours, I'm not doing anything else until I do that first most important item of the day. And then I actually schedule time in my day now. And again, like, this is the perfect day. I by no means follow this to a T. It's really helpful when I do, but I schedule like an hour and a half where it's like, this is social media time. This is shameless social media time. So I know that if I don't give myself the space to do it, like if I don't give myself that Friday where I can have the cookie, you know, and that
Right.
diet cheat day and my digital wellness routine, that it's going to just start to, the willpower is not going to be enough. The discipline's not going to be enough, and it's going to collapse around me. So I give myself, thanks to Nir Eyal and this practice, like that hour I'm doing social media shamelessly. I need to exercise. I need to exercise for at least 30 minutes a day. So when I'm transitioning right now from like deep work towards phone calls and podcast recordings and things like that, that's really the best time for me to work out. So I'll exercise usually in like the late afternoon, early evening. And then before bed, I try to keep my phone off and I try to practice some kind of meditation. Um, Also, just like writing once a week for my podcast newsletter is extremely cathartic for me. I want to pick up this practice of kind of daily pages,
Yeah.
which I hear is really, really powerful. Just like journaling 3 pages a day, free flow. Yeah. So those are some of my practices.
I love
I
it.
drink coffee. I eat meat. You know, like
You're like,
I eat gluten.
I'm not totally, you know.
I eat
I'm
cake.
still human.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's always really nice to I your vibe totally attracts your tribe. I mean, I always
Mm.
say this, but it's so true. And when we connect with people like this, I think it just becomes more evident because we too have so many things in alignment with your day, you know, that both of us do, you know, in terms of dedicating time and time for yourself, time to play, time to take care of your body, time to disconnect. And So it's always nice to hear, you know.
Time to play.
Yeah.
I need
Yeah,
more time
it's
to play.
important.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
you got to
super.
schedule that in too, in a way. Like I'm a list
Mm.
girl. I always say this. Like I have
Me
lists for
too.
my list, and I don't like necessarily like I don't really stick to all of it, but I need to know that I have it written there because I have a reference point that just like
Yeah.
brings me
Wait, what
back
was
on
it that I wanted
track.
to do? Okay, there we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah, and so yeah, you got to kind of schedule that in when you have so much work to do to just be like, oh wait, I have to play. Like, just be a kid, a child. Like, let the child out for a little bit, whatever that means. It could be art or music or dancing, or like bringing that into your workout or some form of play. I don't know. I think that's important, but that's
Oh,
me.
super. Yeah, super important. I agree.
But you're into meditation and you've taught meditation.
Mhm.
What I know it's really helped us as well. I'm doing a weekly meditation that I'm going to start soon, by the way.
Awesome.
Guys. But for you, what have you felt have been the benefits of meditation that you've experienced, in your life and the ripple effects?
Yeah. Well, I think there's there's so many, and it's hard to kind of express them. They're more experiential, but what comes to mind for me is this idea that I always come back to, which is when you make time for yourself, you make time. And so it's just like without fail, if there's a day when, let's say, I have to do my morning meditation, but I wake up late and the voice inside of me is just like, skip it. You don't have time. You got to get your shit done. Like, skip it. If I skip it, I don't know what happens. But if I decide to do it, if I say, you know what, Mark, just do 10 minutes, just do 15 minutes, inevitably, like that next phone call will get canceled. Like, so the person will email me like, hey, sorry, can't make it, and I'll be sitting there and then I'll end up finishing my meditation like, oh, I'm 5 minutes late, but I feel fine about it. Go on. And it's like, the person's like, oh, sorry, I had to move that call. And I'm like, it just like space.
Right.
It creates space. And I really think that our perception of time is so relative. And there's still so much we don't understand about that. And so what I find is that when I create space and time for myself, it's like I've created space and time in general. And that's just like a really, really cool, powerful feeling. And something that I'm personally working on is allowing. I'm definitely more towards the masculine doing. What am I going to do next? What's next on the list? Like you, Tatiana, I'm just like, let me check this off the list. Let me check this off the list, and it feels so good. But sometimes it's like we need to allow for the rewards of our practices to kind of flow back to us. And so I'm personally working on that as well. But I would say just also the last thing is kind of like a heightened awareness. And maybe this is, this just a heightened awareness and appreciation of synchronicities, those little moments that it's like, oh yeah, that's actually important. That keeps showing up. Let me lean into that a little bit. And then I do, and there's something really special there. And I wouldn't have known that had I not taken the time to kind of just be still. So.
And so do you feel like all of this kind of brought you to a place of shifting your life? Like, do you feel like there was a moment where all of these practices and all of these kind of tools and wellness routines kind of came together, and you just like those moments where you feel like you just woke up and everything just changed?
Yeah.
You're like, wait a second, but I've been working so hard and it wasn't working, and now I just like, but everything fell into place. Like, did you have that light bulb moment with all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few light bulb moments, and it's a forever journey. Like, the light bulb will go off and something will shift, and then the ego will creep in with a desire to attach to that sensation of that light bulb. and it'll be like holding on for dear life to that feeling of freedom that I experienced in that one moment in time. And that becomes the new, the new attachment, the new desire, the new God, so to speak. And so then it's just a reconditioning, a rebirth, a redoing, re-experiencing again. And so I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that that I've come to a place where there's like a clear shift. But over time, I think that if I had to evaluate, like my lows are either less low or don't last as long. And similarly, like my highs are potentially less high or don't last as long. I'm like hugging that emotional midline where I'm able to just cope with the uncertainty of life in an easier kind of way. And I think ease is definitely a great term that comes to mind, which is just like, Deepak says, like, effortless ease. It's just so powerful, especially for those of us that are just, as I'm saying this, it's medicine for me because I fall into old patterns all the time, old conditioning around worthiness and what it means to, to receive love or to receive value conditionally. And so even saying this, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's a good memory. That
Isn't it?
ease.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about having these conversations is we actually remind ourselves of so much. Like when we're sharing and giving, we're giving to ourselves. It's just this, I feel like that's one of the biggest things we can do is share and give, and everyone wins that way. It's
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, you've
Thanks.
mentioned so many things that you're passionate about, but are there any specific things that you really are focused on communicating with not only your community, but also the world currently?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Well, to that question, so for me, I think what I'm focused most on communicating is that we are all going through it together. We are all human. And so whether you're the billionaire investor who has the capacity and power to shift and move mountains, or you're the occupational therapist working with children with autism, grinding it out 8 hours a day literally on the floor with families, making 60,000 a year, or a blue collar worker in the oil and gas space who is losing your livelihood because the price of oil is negative, and whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or a spiritual person or not, like the experience of being human is that which we all share. And that comes with like the good, the bad, and the ugly. And one thing that I think I'm really focused on is I find that there is an abundance, especially today in social media. There is an abundance of spiritual leaders who are available to tell you what the right or appropriate mental framework is for yourself, how to get into that abundance mindset being something I keep hearing. And I'm just reminded that everyone's path, we share that collective, but everyone's path is unique. And we all also have this inherent desire to seek out authority figures and to seek out teachers and guides, which I think is a beautiful thing. And we all need them. And like, I so need guides and I call them into my life all the time. But we have to make space for the shadow side. We have to make space for the darkness. We have to make space for the full spectrum of human experience. None of this spiritual bypass, like light and love. I once taught a yoga class, and it was one of my first yoga classes. And I had heard this girl who was also in my teacher training, say, inhale peace, exhale love. And it sounded so, so beautiful when she said it. So, so beautiful. And I was like, man, that's cool. I'm going to try that. So I was like, all right, everyone, inhale peace, exhale love. And it just like didn't roll off of my tongue in a way that worked. And maybe it did better now, but you know, we each have our own path. We each have our own way in our own time. And so the answers that you seek are inside of yourself. If you're going through it, you're not alone. We're all going through it, from the greatest master to, you know, to the novice student. Like, we're all just fucking human.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
we're here to experience everything that there is.
that's it.
Yeah, for sure.
And can it be fun?
Play.
I've been talking about that a lot. Like, why does the healing process always have to feel so heavy and so weighted? Why can't you also have this, you know, relationship with it that's also lighthearted and playful, and, you know, kind of mix both together? Because it shouldn't always feel like, oh, such a process, right?
Yeah.
And it also shouldn't be distracting all the time. It's just like really accepting the duality of every single moment, every single person, every single experience that comes up, and to just be like, okay, well, this is my reflection, the light and the shadow, but a lot of us don't want to look at that shadow because that means that we have to look at our shadow.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess where we want to finish this conversation off is, what legacy do you hope to leave behind?
Ooh, that's wow.
I know it's a big one.
No, I mean, it's a big one. And legacy is like this interesting whole rabbit hole to go down. You know, the desire for humans to survive beyond themselves, beyond ourselves. Like, you know, we're the only species that seems to consider this, on Earth at least, that seems to consider this concept of legacy. And is that ego driven? You know, like Marcus Aurelius's writings, he's writing for himself, but he constantly reminds himself that we're all just dust. You know, like 3 generations from now, no one will remember you, which is quite ironic because here we are reading his work anyways, like thousands of years later, or 1,000 years later. But for me, I think if I can leave a legacy where every person, not every person, but most people that I come into contact with are like, I'd like to leave a legacy where people that interact with me and my content understand themselves better, you know, and that empowers them to get through life and to find meaning and purpose and joy. If that's what I can leave behind, I think that would be extremely powerful. So yeah, I hope to do that.
I love that. I think that's
Well, I think you're definitely
Thanks.
on that path already. So, you know, thank
you.
you for the work that you do and the conversations you have and the work you do on yourself to then be able to fulfill that legacy.
Thank you.
It's, you know, it's felt for sure, you know, even past your words, it's an energy that you transmit. So thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for allowing me to share my experience with your community. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been fun. It's been super fun. I mean, this stuff is like, it's the best.
For sure. We feel so energized after these conversations. It's just like, like that deep breath. It just comes, you know, it's like, oh my God, do we want to keep going?
Yes. It's interesting because it's like coming from New York, where when we used to live there, you would just be outside meeting people and come across these kind of conversations, and now we have to like seek them out, but we have a reason to, you know, like this curiosity also helps us seek out conversations that we might not be exposed to just encountering for a while, you know?
Absolutely.
And I
Keeping
love
it
that
real.
we're all like
Yeah.
New York, went to LA,
Yeah.
then to Europe, then going back. Like there's a triangle here of like, okay, there's a path happening. Cool.
Completely.
So, all right. Thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode. Thank you so much, Marc, for your time.
Yes, thank you so
for
much.
your amazing words, for your amazing energy. This is awesome. So
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Let's be in touch. Let me know when it comes out. Thanks everyone.
Yeah, we will for sure. We'll be in touch. Have a good day or night.
You too. Take care.
Bye.